It's this guilt by association that is becoming very pronounced, and it has very profound effect. We had one individual recently in our office where he was being questioned and interrogated, a very simple guy, doing 2 jobs, barely surviving and sending money back home to Pakistan. And he was so excited he got his Canadian citizenship, so he sent an email out to about 300-400 people on the list. One of the person he sent the list to is suspected for being an Al-Qaeda operative without any real evidence. And because of that, CSIS wants to interrogate him, question him, and we only found out later that it was because he had sent this email. And I said to the agent, I said, just before I came into this meeting, I sent out an email blast to about 500 people here. If you come 5 years later and ask me, you had communication with this individual, how would I remember that? And yet he was dragged into investigation, and he had to go through all kinds of problems. And so this guilt by association is being used extensively, and it will impact on each one of you. So you need to stand up. And I'm going to really run through this. Charities. There are many, many cases of Muslim charities being targeted and shut down. In the United States today, the Holy Land Foundation, which was, the trial had gone through, a mistrial had been declared, again it was retried, and they've been now convicted. But if you look closely at these cases, they're not terrorism offenses. They're other offenses which, because of influence by the neoconservatives and the Zionist movements, particularly when it comes to funding Palestinian issues, they shut them down. And they track. We have a case in our office right now with one of the largest Muslim charities, and basically through innuendo and suspicion, they're trying to shut down the operation. Okay? And what they wanted was a list of all, this private entity wanted a list of all the donors. Why? Because they want to put it on the internet, and they want to pass it to U.S. authorities. So this is dangerous. We need to speak up. Just to wrap up, there is this assumption out there that the youth are being radicalized. There's no evidence of this, yet it's conveyed as if it's the truth, it's the reality. We need to challenge that. They need to either prove that this is happening or back off from this, because the assumption is all the youth are being radicalized. And the question that should be asked, if it is the case, why are they being radicalized? I say part of the reason, if there is radicalization, is because of the ridiculous direction that our foreign policy takes in following after the United States. It's the targeting of individuals in the community. How do you show to people that you're not targeting the Muslim community when in fact everything is being targeted at the Muslim community? When the Muslims tried to use the Arbitration Act to do faith-based arbitration, the government comes and scraps it. How do you explain to people it's not because of Muslims? When 3 Muslim law students, one of them happens to be here, Naseem Mitawani, they file a complaint using the human rights legislation. They appoint Professor Richard Moon to look into whether, this legislation should be amended. How do you talk to young people and say to them, no, they're not really targeting Muslims and attacking Muslims? It's very difficult to do that, to convince people of that, because what they see is totally contrary to what's being said. Now, so it raises a number of issues, and I'm just wrapping up with this. There's questions of lack of access to justice. How do these people who are being harassed, targeted, how do they get access to justice? Legal aid doesn't fund these things. How do you get recourse? If you have a right but there's no remedy, how do you deal with it? So somebody loses a job because Canadian intelligence passes the information to U.S. authorities and he can't fly to the United States anymore for his job. What do? There's no recourse. There's so many of these things happening where people have no recourse. And in our office, for instance, and through the offices of the Canadian Muslim Civil Liberties and through CareCan, where I was former legal counsel there are so many issues coming up to people, but there's no way to deal with it. We need to lobby as Canadian citizens of the government to say, listen, either you advance legal aid funding to these things, or you set up some kind of mechanism to remedy these. Part of the reason is a lack of sophistication, and I think I'm running out of time. Lack of sophistication, lack of understanding of Islam and Muslims. I'll give you one very simple example of two examples. One is the Mackenzie Institute submitted a paper to the government on Muslim concerns in the Muslim community. And this goes unchallenged. Mackenzie, a think tank, says to the Canadian government that the 6th pillar of Islam is jihad. How many of you know that? I'm Muslim for all my life. I never knew that. The Mackenzie Institute is telling us this. Now, based on that, the government will take action. Right? We have a case where a charity we had applied through the government CSIS does a report, comes back, and denies charity status. And so we question and challenge. Eventually it comes out the reason they're denying charity status, and this tells me that CSIS at that point, at that time at least, wasn't very sophisticated. The reason they were denying, I'm assuming CSIS is the one that passed this intelligence to Canadian Revenue Agency, they said because on the website of this organization it said that they follow the teachings of the Salaf Salih. Which Muslim doesn't try to follow the practices of the Salaf Salih? They interpreted that to mean that it's a Salafi Islam. And even if it was Salafi Islam, does Salafi Islam automatically mean terrorism? No. I know many, many Salafi Muslims who do not accept violence. But that is the kind of misinformation. And I wrote them back a letter saying, if you say that I follow the disciples of Jesus Christ, is that wrong? Then they had to back off. But that's the level of misunderstanding. So we need to engage the government to change that. So lastly, I just want to wrap up with 2 points. One is, we can all come and listen to these lectures and talks, and there's great speakers coming after me. But if we go home and do nothing about it, as Dennis said, you say, oh, what a great talk. But if you don't do anything about it, if we don't go and do anything about it, this was a useless exercise. It was entertainment. So I urge each one of you to go from here. Number one, leave from here and go and join one of these organizations. Be it CareCan, CIC, PIP. There's lots of alphabets in this direction as well. So please go and join these organizations and get engaged. Give them moral support, financial support, give them your time. Secondly, I urge each one of you to do something. Write a letter to the Prime Minister on Omar Khadr. Get involved in one of the other projects. And lastly, one of the reasons this event was organized was to launch a national survey. We've been always talking about Muslim community being targeted, Arabs being targeted. Whenever we've gone to the government, I've met with the government many times, we tell them this is what's happening. They say, well, there's no evidence of this. One of the reasons this event was organized, we wanted to launch a national survey. And we have it all pretty much finalized, and we need some support from you. We need some financial support. We need some volunteers who can do some serious work of compiling the survey so we can actually go to the government, so that people can actually use these in the court, in the court to show, look, this is what's happening. Racial profiling is a reality. Targeting of Muslim institutions, Muslim individuals is a reality. We need to be able to document it. So I urge you to please come forward. I think there's sign-up sheets left outside the door. Please sign up. But if you do sign up for this project, I've been doing this for many, many years. We get all kinds of volunteers. People get excited, but nobody follows through. So this time, if you sign up for this particular project, we're setting up a website, and if you take a responsibility and you don't follow through, we'll be naming and shaming you on the website. We will say, Muhammad said he was going to get back to us, contacting 3 MSAs. He didn't do it. And I'm being serious, because that's the only way we can get things done. And I urge each one of you to go and do this, because our reputation as a country relies on this. And this is my last story, and I'm done. I was invited last year to Egypt to observe military trials of civilians. And I met a number of lawyers, including some from Syria, who spoke to me and said, they used to respect Canada. Canada was the best country. In fact, he wanted to escape to Canada. But then he heard about the treatment of Maher Arar. He heard the treatment of the other individuals in the Syrian prison and Canada's reaction. And he said that was such a bad experience for him that he couldn't believe that Canada didn't really stand up and, in fact, encouraged and participated in this. Is that the reputation we want as Canadians? I don't think so. We need to tell Canada to start walking the walk and not just talking the talk when it comes to human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisal. We assigned you an almost impossible task, but you accomplished it very well, covering all of that. Thank you.